The Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BCE, was the first Persian empire and one of the largest empires in history. It stretched from the Indus Valley in the east to the shores of the Aegean Sea in the west, encompassing diverse cultures, languages, and traditions. The Persian rulers developed an efficient system of governance that allowed for relative stability and prosperity despite the vastness of their territory. They implemented policies of tolerance toward conquered peoples, respecting local customs and religions, which helped maintain order within the empire. This sophisticated administration laid the foundation for Persia's dominance and influenced the governance of future empires. Among the most significant rulers of the Achaemenid Empire was Darius I, also known as Darius the Great, who ruled from 522 to 486 BCE. His reign marked a period of immense expansion and consolidation of Persian power. He reorganized the empire into satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap who answered directly to the king. This system ensured efficient tax collection and law enforcement, while allowing a degree of autonomy to local rulers. Additionally, Darius initiated ambitious construction projects, including the Royal Road, which facilitated communication and trade across the empire. His efforts to strengthen administrative control and economic stability left a lasting legacy that would define Persian governance for generations. The expansionist policies of Darius I, however, also brought Persia into direct conflict with the Greek city-states. His military campaigns against Greece, particularly the First Persian invasion, culminated in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, where the Persian army suffered a surprising defeat at the hands of the Athenians. This loss did not significantly weaken the Persian Empire, but it fueled animosity between Persia and Greece, setting the stage for future confrontations. Darius, determined to avenge this defeat, began preparations for another invasion, but his plans were cut short by his death in 486 BCE. The responsibility of continuing his campaign and maintaining the empire fell to his son, Xerxes I. Xerxes inherited an empire at its height, with a vast and well-organized administrative system, a strong economy, and one of the most formidable military forces in the ancient world. However, he also faced challenges from within, as rebellions erupted in Egypt and Babylon shortly after his accession. These internal conflicts forced Xerxes to first focus on consolidating his rule before he could turn his attention to Greece. His early reign was defined by both military action and the assertion of his legitimacy as king, as he sought to prove himself a worthy successor to his father. The Persian monarchy was deeply rooted in divine authority, and Xerxes, like his predecessors, claimed to rule by the will of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism. This belief reinforced his right to govern and justified his military campaigns as missions of divine order. Persian kings were not only political leaders, but also religious figures who played a crucial role in maintaining cosmic balance. Xerxes embraced this ideology, using it to strengthen his claim to power and to rally support for his wars, particularly his renewed invasion of Greece. One of the defining aspects of the Achaemenid Empire was its cultural and architectural achievements. Persian rulers, including Xerxes, invested heavily in grand construction projects, the most famous of which was Persepolis. This city, begun by Darius and expanded under Xerxes, symbolized Persian power and sophistication. Its intricate carvings, monumental palaces, and vast columns showcased the empire's artistic and engineering prowess. Persepolis was not just a political center, but also a testament to the empire's wealth and the grandeur of Persian civilization. The empire's ability to integrate various cultures and manage such an expansive territory was a testament to its administrative sophistication. The use of an official language, Aramaic, across the empire, along with a standardized system of weights and measures, facilitated trade and communication. The Persian postal system, one of the most advanced of its time, allowed for rapid transmission of messages across the empire, ensuring that the king remained informed about events in even the most distant provinces. This level of organization contributed to Persia's stability and resilience, even in the face of external threats. Despite its strengths, the empire also had vulnerabilities. The size of the Persian military was immense, but it relied on a diverse array of troops from different regions, each with their own fighting styles and levels of loyalty. While this diversity provided strategic advantages, it also created challenges in coordination and unity during military campaigns. Additionally, the sheer scale of the empire made it difficult to respond quickly to uprisings or external attacks. These weaknesses would become apparent during Xerxes' reign, particularly during his campaigns against Greece. The Persian-Greek conflict was not just a clash of armies, but a collision of two vastly different civilizations. The Greek city-states, despite their internal rivalries, valued individualism, political participation, and decentralized governance, in contrast to the centralized and hierarchical structure of the Persian Empire. The wars between Persia and Greece were, in many ways, struggles over these ideological differences, and they would shape the course of history in both the East and the West. Xerxes' decision to launch a massive invasion of Greece in 480 BCE was driven by both a desire for revenge and a vision of expanding Persian dominance further into Europe. As Xerxes prepared for war, he inherited not only his father's empire, but also his ambitions and his conflicts. The Achaemenid Empire stood at the height of its power, but it also faced significant challenges that would test Xerxes' leadership. His reign would be defined by his military campaigns, his efforts to maintain internal stability, and his contributions to Persian culture and governance. Xerxes was born around 518 BCE, during a time when the Achaemenid Empire was at the height of its expansion under the rule of his father, Darius I. As a member of the royal household, Xerxes grew up surrounded by the wealth, culture, and political intricacies of the Persian court. He was the son of Darius and Atassa, the daughter of Cyrus the Great, which gave him a direct lineage to the empire's founder. This connection to Cyrus, a revered figure in Persian history, strengthened Xerxes' claim to the throne and set him apart from his half-brothers, who were also potential heirs. From an early age, he was groomed for leadership, receiving a royal education that included military training, governance, and religious instruction in the teachings of Zoroastrianism. The Persian court at Persepolis was a hub of power and intrigue, where noble families vied for influence. As the son of the queen, Xerxes enjoyed privileges that other princes did not, and his mother's position gave him a strong advantage in the royal succession. Atassa, as the daughter of Cyrus, played a key role in ensuring that her son would be chosen as Darius' heir. Persian traditions did not strictly follow primogeniture. Instead, the king had the authority to appoint his successor, often choosing the son he believed was most capable of ruling. In Xerxes' case, his bloodline through Atassa provided him with a legitimacy that few could challenge. Despite this advantage, Xerxes' path to the throne was not without obstacles. Darius had several other sons, including Artabazan, his eldest, who argued that he should inherit the throne as the firstborn. However, Artabazan's mother was not of royal blood, making his claim weaker in comparison to Xerxes. The Persian court witnessed a period of political maneuvering, with various factions supporting different heirs. In the end, Darius chose Xerxes, emphasizing his connection to Cyrus the Great and his ability to uphold the empire's traditions. This decision was reinforced by Persian nobles, who recognized the importance of maintaining a stable and legitimate succession. While Darius was still alive, Xerxes played an active role in governance, assisting his father in administrative affairs and gaining experience in leadership. He was appointed as the governor of Babylon, one of the empire's most significant satrapies, giving him first-hand experience in managing a vast and culturally diverse region. However, Babylon was not an easy province to rule. The Babylonians had a history of resisting Persian rule, and Xerxes had to navigate political tensions while asserting Persian authority. This experience would later shape his approach to ruling the empire, as he became known for his strict policies and intolerance toward rebellion. In 486 BCE, Darius I died, leaving behind an empire that was stable but faced ongoing military and political challenges. Xerxes was officially crowned king in a grand ceremony that reinforced his divine right to rule. The coronation took place in Persepolis, the heart of Persian power, and included elaborate rituals honoring Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity of Zoroastrianism. Persian kings were believed to be chosen by the gods, and the ceremony symbolized Xerxes' role as the earthly representative of divine order. The event was attended by Persian nobles, satraps, and foreign dignitaries, all of whom swore loyalty to their new ruler. Almost immediately after ascending the throne, Xerxes was confronted with uprisings in the empire's western provinces. Egypt, which had been under Persian control since Cambyses II's conquest in 525 BCE, rebelled against Persian rule, seeking to restore its independence. The Egyptians were dissatisfied with Persian taxation and administration, and they saw Darius' death as an opportunity to break free. At the same time, Babylon also revolted, presenting a significant challenge to Xerxes' authority. These early revolts tested his leadership and forced him to act swiftly to assert control over the empire. Xerxes responded with military force, leading a campaign to suppress the Egyptian rebellion. He sent a powerful army to Egypt, crushing the resistance and reaffirming Persian dominance over the region. Unlike Darius, who had attempted to accommodate Egyptian traditions, Xerxes took a harsher approach, dismantling some of the privileges that the Egyptians had enjoyed under previous Persian rulers. He appointed a new governor, Achaemenes, his brother, to ensure stricter control over the province. This marked a shift in Persian policy, as Xerxes demonstrated a more authoritarian style of rule compared to his predecessors. After securing Egypt, Xerxes turned his attention to Babylon, where the rebellion posed an even greater threat. Babylon was one of the most important cities in the empire, both politically and economically, and its defiance could inspire other regions to rise against Persian rule. Xerxes' campaign against Babylon was decisive. He recaptured the city, executed its leaders, and imposed heavy punishments on those who had opposed him. Unlike his father, who had respected Babylonian traditions and even adopted the title of King of Babylon, Xerxes abolished this title, signaling that he would no longer tolerate Babylonian aspirations for autonomy. He ordered the destruction of the city's religious statues, an unprecedented act that demonstrated his firm grip on power. These military campaigns solidified Xerxes' rule, proving that he was capable of maintaining order in the vast Persian Empire. However, they also revealed a shift in governance under his reign. Unlike Darius, who had often used diplomacy to integrate newly conquered regions, Xerxes relied more on military force and repression. His actions in Egypt and Babylon sent a clear message that rebellion would not be tolerated, but they also created resentment among the conquered peoples. This approach would later have consequences, as dissatisfaction with Persian rule continued to simmer in various parts of the empire. With internal threats subdued, Xerxes could now turn his attention to the external challenges that lay ahead. His father's unfinished conflict with Greece loomed over his reign, and many Persian nobles and military leaders urged him to continue Darius' mission of subjugating the Greek city-states. As Xerxes settled into his role as the ruler of the vast Achaemenid Empire, he faced an immediate and urgent task: securing his hold over rebellious territories. The empire stretched across an immense and diverse landscape, comprising numerous ethnic groups, cultures, and political traditions. Though his father, Darius I, had built a sophisticated administrative system to manage this diversity, it did not eliminate the ever-present risk of insurrection. Xerxes' early reign was marked by decisive military campaigns against those who challenged his rule, particularly in Egypt and Babylon, two regions with long histories of resisting Persian domination. Egypt, one of the empire's most valuable provinces, had long been a source of both wealth and unrest. The Egyptians had never fully embraced Persian rule, viewing themselves as an ancient civilization with a distinct identity. Under Darius I, Persian governance had been relatively tolerant, incorporating elements of Egyptian religious practices and traditions into the administration. However, with Darius' death in 486 BCE, The Egyptians seized the opportunity to rebel, rallying around a local leader who sought to expel Persian influence. This uprising was not merely a political challenge, but a symbolic act of defiance against foreign rule. Xerxes responded with overwhelming military force, sending a large army under the command of his brother, Achaemenes, to crush the rebellion. The Persian forces, well-trained and disciplined, swiftly re-established control over Egypt, defeating the insurgents and executing their leaders. Unlike his father, Xerxes did not attempt to appease the Egyptians after the victory. Instead, he imposed harsher measures, tightening Persian control over the province. He raised taxes, stationed a permanent military presence in key cities, and placed Egypt under direct rule rather than allowing it the semi-autonomous status it had previously enjoyed. This approach secured Persian dominance, but deepened Egyptian resentment, ensuring that tensions would remain throughout his reign. While Xerxes was occupied with Egypt, a more serious rebellion erupted in Babylon, the empire's cultural and economic jewel. Babylon had been a center of power for millennia, and even under Persian rule, it retained much of its prestige. Previous Persian kings had honored Babylonian traditions, with Cyrus the Great famously presenting himself as a liberator when he conquered the city, and Darius I continuing to acknowledge its significance. However, Babylonian pride ran deep, and local leaders saw Darius' death as a chance to reassert their independence. The Babylonian rebellion was led by two successive insurgents, Belshazzar and Shamash-Sharabi, both of whom declared themselves kings in an attempt to restore Babylonian sovereignty. Their defiance posed a significant threat to Persian authority, as Babylon's wealth and strategic location made it one of the empire's most vital cities. If the rebellion succeeded, it could inspire other provinces to rise up, potentially fracturing the empire. Xerxes could not afford to let this challenge go unanswered. His response was swift and brutal. Persian forces stormed Babylon, crushing the rebellion with ruthless efficiency. Xerxes did not simply defeat the insurgents. He sought to send a clear message that resistance would not be tolerated. After regaining control, he executed the rebel leaders and ordered widespread purges of those who had supported them. However, his most shocking act was the destruction of Babylon's religious and cultural symbols. Unlike his predecessors, who had respected the city's traditions, Xerxes abolished the title of King of Babylon, effectively demoting the city's status within the empire. He also ordered the destruction of the statue of Marduk, the chief Babylonian deity, an unprecedented move that signaled the end of Babylon's privileged position. These actions had profound consequences. While Xerxes successfully reasserted control, his policies alienated many of his subjects, particularly in Mesopotamia. Babylon, once a flourishing center of Persian administration, never regained its former prominence under Achaemenid rule. Xerxes' harsh treatment of the city contrasted sharply with the policies of earlier Persian rulers, who had sought to integrate rather than suppress local cultures. His approach, while effective in the short term, planted the seeds of long-term discontent that would weaken Persian rule in the region over time. Beyond Egypt and Babylon, Xerxes also had to maintain order in other parts of the empire. In the eastern territories, the Persian satraps in Bactria and Sogdiana faced occasional unrest, though these regions remained relatively stable compared to the western provinces. The Ionian cities along the coast of Asia Minor, which had been the source of the Ionian revolt during Darius' reign, were closely monitored to prevent any resurgence of rebellion. Xerxes ensured that Persian garrisons were stationed in key locations, ready to respond to any signs of defiance. Despite these internal challenges, Xerxes also continued the administrative and infrastructural projects initiated by his predecessors. The empire's communication network, including the Royal Road, was maintained and expanded to ensure that messages and orders could travel swiftly across the vast territory. The Persian postal system, one of the most advanced of its time, allowed the king to receive timely updates on the situation in various provinces. This helped Xerxes maintain control, even as he prepared for external conflicts that would soon dominate his reign. By the time Xerxes had successfully quelled the revolts in Egypt and Babylon, he had firmly established his authority. However, the suppression of these uprisings came at a cost. Unlike Darius, who had balanced military strength with diplomacy, Xerxes relied more heavily on force, making his rule feel more oppressive to those under his control. While he had proven himself a capable leader in securing the empire, he had also fostered deep resentment among his subjects. This underlying tension would remain a persistent challenge, even as Xerxes turned his attention toward his most ambitious endeavor, the invasion of Greece. With internal stability restored, Xerxes could now focus on fulfilling his father's unfinished mission, avenging the Persian defeat at Marathon and expanding the empire's influence into Europe. With the internal revolts in Egypt and Babylon firmly suppressed, Xerxes turned his attention to an even greater challenge, the invasion of Greece. This was not merely a campaign of expansion. It was a war of vengeance, fueled by the humiliating Persian defeat at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE during his father's reign. Darius had vowed to punish the Greeks for their defiance, but his death left the task unfinished. Now, as the new ruler of the Persian Empire, Xerxes sought to complete what his father had begun. However, he knew that this campaign would require unprecedented levels of preparation, as the Greek city-states, though small compared to the might of Persia, had already proven their resilience and military skill. Unlike previous conflicts, Xerxes' invasion of Greece would be one of the most ambitious military undertakings in ancient history. His vision was grand. Rather than sending a mere punitive expedition as Darius had done, Xerxes aimed to subjugate all of Greece and incorporate it into the Persian Empire. This required an enormous army, an intricate logistical network, and careful diplomatic maneuvering to weaken Greek resistance before the war even began. Xerxes devoted several years to these preparations, ensuring that every detail was meticulously planned. One of the first and most critical aspects of the invasion was gathering the vast Persian army. Soldiers were recruited from every corner of the empire, from the plains of Mesopotamia to the mountains of Bactria and the deserts of Egypt. The Persian military was a diverse force, consisting of elite Persian warriors, cavalry units from Central Asia, skilled archers from Scythia, heavily armed infantry from Anatolia, and naval forces from Phoenicia and Egypt. By the time the army was fully assembled, it was the largest force the ancient world had ever seen. Some sources claim it numbered over 1 million men, though modern historians estimate a force between 150,000 and 300,000. Regardless of the exact number, it was an army that dwarfed any force the Greeks could muster. However, assembling such a massive army was only part of the challenge. Xerxes also had to ensure that his troops could be supplied with food, water, and equipment throughout the long march to Greece. The Persian Empire had an advanced logistical system, but even so, supporting such a large force required extraordinary planning. Supply depots were established along the route, grain and livestock were stockpiled, and engineers were tasked with improving roads and constructing bridges to allow for easier passage. The army would not only rely on local resources, but also on shipments from Persia's vast network of satrapies, ensuring a steady flow of provisions. Perhaps the most ambitious engineering feat of the entire campaign was the construction of a bridge across the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, the narrow strait that separates Asia from Europe. To avoid the need for a slow and risky naval transport of troops, Xerxes ordered 2 enormous pontoon bridges to be built using ships anchored together and connected by wooden planks. This allowed his entire army to march directly from Anatolia into Europe, demonstrating Persian ingenuity and determination. However, the first attempt at constructing the bridge failed when a storm destroyed it. In response, Xerxes famously ordered the waters of the Hellespont to be lashed as punishment, a symbolic act meant to display his authority over both nature and man. A second bridge was then built successfully, and his army was able to cross into Europe in what was one of the most dramatic moments of the campaign. Diplomacy was another key aspect of Xerxes' strategy. While preparing for the invasion, he sent emissaries to various Greek city-states, demanding their submission in the form of earth and water, a traditional Persian gesture of loyalty. Many smaller Greek states, particularly those in the north, chose to comply rather than risk destruction. However, Athens and Sparta, the two most powerful Greek states, refused to yield. The Spartans, in particular, viewed Persian dominance as a direct threat to their way of life, and their military culture ensured that they would fight to the end rather than surrender. The rejection by Athens and Sparta meant that the war would not be a simple campaign of conquest, but a prolonged struggle against determined and well-organized resistance. The Persian Navy played a crucial role in Xerxes' plans. The fleet was composed of ships from Phoenicia, Egypt, and the Greek cities of Ionia, all of which had extensive naval experience. Unlike his father's failed invasion, which had suffered from poor naval support, Xerxes ensured that his land forces would be accompanied by a powerful fleet to secure supply lines and provide strategic mobility. The Navy was tasked with escorting the army along the coast, protecting vital shipping routes, and engaging Greek naval forces to prevent them from disrupting the invasion. Recognizing the importance of naval superiority, Xerxes placed great trust in his fleet, believing that it would ensure the success of his campaign. As the Persian army moved closer to Greece, fear spread among the Greek city-states. Some chose to submit to Persian rule, while others debated their options. Themistocles, a prominent Athenian general, recognized the gravity of the situation and began urging his fellow Greeks to prepare for war. He emphasized the importance of naval power and pushed for the expansion of the Athenian fleet, which would later prove to be a decisive factor in the conflict. Meanwhile, the Spartans, under King Leonidas, prepared for the inevitable land battles that would take place once the Persian army reached Greek soil. Despite the overwhelming strength of his forces, Xerxes did not underestimate the Greeks. He was well aware of their ability to fight fiercely when their homeland was threatened. Reports from Persian spies indicated that the Greeks were mobilizing, but Xerxes remained confident in his numerical advantage and the superior resources of his empire. He believed that a direct show of force would demoralize the Greeks, forcing them to surrender without prolonged resistance. However, this assumption would soon be challenged in the battles that followed. As Xerxes led his army deeper into Greece, his forces encountered the first major resistance at a narrow pass known as Thermopylae, a strategic gateway to central Greece. This battle, which would become one of the most famous in history, was not just a military engagement, but a defining moment of the Persian invasion. The Greeks, despite being vastly outnumbered, chose to make their stand here, using the geography to their advantage. What followed was a brutal and heroic struggle that tested both Persian might and Greek resilience. The Greek defense was led by King Leonidas of Sparta, who commanded a small but elite force of warriors. The core of his army consisted of 300 Spartan hoplites, renowned for their discipline, strength, and unwavering dedication to warfare. However, they were not alone. Several thousand Greek allies, including soldiers from Thespiae, Thebes, and other city-states, joined them in the defense of the pass. Despite their smaller numbers, the Greeks had chosen their battlefield wisely. Thermopylae was a narrow strip of land, flanked by steep cliffs on one side and the Aegean Sea on the other, meaning the Persians could not fully use their superior numbers. When Xerxes arrived at Thermopylae, he was initially unimpressed by the small Greek force blocking his path. He expected them to surrender or flee upon seeing the size of his army. Instead, the Spartans calmly prepared for battle, a sight that reportedly astonished the Persian king. According to historical accounts, he even sent an emissary to offer the Greeks a chance to lay down their arms. Leonidas' response was defiant and legendary. "Come and take them." This unyielding attitude signaled that the Greeks were prepared to fight to the death. On the first day of battle, Xerxes ordered his Medes and Scythians, two experienced Persian units, to break through the Greek lines. However, they were met with fierce resistance. The Greeks, particularly the Spartans, fought in a tight phalanx formation, with their large shields and long spears creating an almost impenetrable wall. The narrowness of the pass meant that Persian numbers counted for little. Only a small portion of their forces could engage at a time. Each wave of Persian soldiers was systematically cut down, their light armor proving ineffective against the disciplined Greek hoplites. Frustrated by the slow progress, Xerxes deployed his elite warriors, the Immortals, his personal guard, and the most formidable unit in the Persian army. These soldiers, clad in fine armor and armed with bows, spears, and swords, were expected to overwhelm the Greeks. Yet, even they struggled against the disciplined phalanx. The Spartans, using superior tactics, rotated their troops to keep fresh warriors in the fight, while the Persians, with no room to maneuver, suffered heavy losses. Xerxes watched in disbelief as his most elite troops failed to break the Greek defenses. The battle continued into the second day, with much of the same results. Greek tactics and the terrain worked in their favor, while the Persians grew increasingly frustrated. Xerxes, now realizing that brute force alone would not suffice, sought an alternative strategy. It was at this moment that fortune favored the Persians, not through strength, but through treachery. A local Greek named Ephialtes approached the Persian camp and revealed the existence of a hidden mountain path that bypassed the Greek position. Seeing an opportunity to outflank his enemies, Xerxes quickly sent a contingent of his best troops through this path under the cover of darkness. As dawn broke on the third day, the Greeks discovered that they were surrounded. The Persian force had emerged behind them, effectively trapping them between two enemy lines. Recognizing that the battle was lost, Leonidas ordered most of the Greek troops to withdraw, allowing only his 300 Spartans, along with 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans, to remain and fight to the end. This self-sacrificial decision was meant to delay the Persian advance long enough for the rest of Greece to prepare for the coming invasion. In their final stand, the Spartans and their allies fought with unmatched ferocity. With their spears broken, they wielded swords. When their swords shattered, they fought with bare hands and teeth. But sheer numbers eventually overwhelmed them. Leonidas was killed in the fighting, and his men fought to recover his body, refusing to let it fall into Persian hands. In the end, the last remaining Greek warriors were surrounded and annihilated, their bodies lying in heaps along the battlefield. Despite their defeat, the Greeks had achieved something remarkable. They had inflicted severe casualties on the Persian army, proving that the mighty empire was not invincible. Xerxes, though victorious, was not celebrating. He had expected a swift and effortless conquest, but instead, he had lost thousands of his best soldiers to a mere few thousand Greeks. As a final insult, Leonidas' body was mutilated and placed on display, a rare act of cruelty from the Persian king, who was typically respectful of fallen enemies. This suggested that the Spartan resistance had deeply angered him. With Thermopylae secured, Xerxes' army now had a clear path to Athens, the heart of Greek resistance. However, the heroic last stand of Leonidas and his men had bought the Greeks precious time. They now understood the Persian strategy and could prepare for the next phase of the war. The sacrifice at Thermopylae would not be in vain. It would become a rallying cry for all of Greece, inspiring resistance and unity against the invaders. After the hard-fought battle at Thermopylae, Xerxes pushed deeper into Greek territory, his army now virtually unopposed. With the Spartans and their allies defeated, the Persian war machine marched southward, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The next major objective was Athens, the heart of Greek resistance, and the city that had most directly provoked Persia by aiding the Ionian revolt years earlier. For Xerxes, the capture of Athens was not merely a military necessity, it was an act of vengeance. As the Persian army advanced, the Athenians faced a difficult choice: attempt to defend the city with their outnumbered forces or abandon it and fight another day. Under the leadership of Themistocles, a brilliant strategist, they chose the latter. Themistocles understood that trying to hold Athens against the massive Persian army would be futile. Instead, he convinced the city's population to evacuate to the nearby island of Salamis, while the Athenian navy prepared for a decisive confrontation at sea. The city itself was left almost entirely empty. save for a few defenders who refused to flee. When the Persian army arrived at Athens, they found a mostly deserted city. Any hope of a grand conquest against a resisting population was shattered. However, a handful of Athenians had barricaded themselves on the Acropolis, the sacred hilltop fortress that housed Athens' most revered temples. Rather than surrender, they chose to make a final stand against the invaders. But against the overwhelming numbers of the Persian army, their resistance was short-lived. Persian soldiers stormed the Acropolis, slaughtering the defenders and taking control of the citadel. With Athens now in his hands, Xerxes enacted the ultimate act of retribution. He ordered the burning of the city, reducing its homes, temples, and monuments to ashes. The flames consumed the Parthenon's predecessor, the old temple of Athena, along with countless other structures that had stood for generations. The destruction of Athens was meant to be a warning to the rest of Greece, a demonstration of Persian might, and an answer to the insult the Greeks had delivered to Darius years before. Smoke from the city's ruins darkened the sky, and the once thriving metropolis was left in smoldering ruins. Though Xerxes had achieved his goal, the victory was hollow. The true power of Athens lay not in its buildings, but in its people, and they had escaped. Themistocles and the Athenian navy remained intact, preparing for a confrontation that would soon change the course of the war. The Persians had won the land, but the Athenians still controlled the Aegean Sea, a crucial factor that would determine the fate of the invasion. Xerxes, despite his triumph, was growing increasingly anxious. The war was taking longer than he had anticipated. The sheer size of his army required a constant flow of supplies, and the further it advanced into Greece, the more difficult logistics became. Meanwhile, the Persian fleet, though formidable, had yet to secure complete dominance over the Greeks at sea. Xerxes understood that as long as the Greek navy remained a threat, his campaign was far from over. In an attempt to consolidate his gains, Xerxes established a Persian garrison in Athens and ordered the reconstruction of some parts of the city to use as a military base. His forces continued to raid nearby settlements, attempting to crush any remaining Greek resistance. However, rather than breaking their enemies' will, the destruction of Athens only strengthened Greek resolve. Across the region, city-states that had previously considered surrender now saw the war as a fight for their very survival. The Persian invasion had unified the once fractured Greek world. Meanwhile, Themistocles was carefully setting a trap for the Persian navy. He sent a secret message to Xerxes, pretending to be a traitor and claiming that the Greek fleet was in disarray, ready to surrender if attacked immediately. This deception played into Xerxes' confidence. He had just taken Athens with ease, and he believed the Greeks were now desperate. Eager to complete his conquest, he ordered his fleet to sail into the Straits of Salamis, where he expected to deliver the final blow to Greek resistance. As the Persian fleet prepared for battle, Xerxes set up a golden throne on the slopes of Mount Aigaleo, overlooking the waters of Salamis. From this vantage point, he intended to watch his navy crush the Greeks, believing that victory was within his grasp. What he did not realize, however, was that he was walking directly into Themistocles' trap. The Persian king, who had just seen Athens burn, was about to witness a battle that would decide the fate of his entire campaign. As the Persian fleet sailed into the narrow straits of Salamis, Xerxes watched from his golden throne on the slopes of Mount Aigaleo, eager to witness the final destruction of the Greek resistance. From his elevated position, he could see the entirety of his vast navy. Hundreds of warships from Phoenicia, Egypt, Cyprus, and Ionia filling the waters, their oars slicing through the waves in perfect unison. The sight was a testament to Persian naval power, a force unmatched in size and reputation. Victory seemed inevitable. However, unseen beneath the surface of this spectacle was Themistocles' trap, one of the most brilliant strategies of the war. The Greek admiral had deliberately lured the Persian fleet into the narrow waters of Salamis, where their numerical advantage would be neutralized. Unlike the open sea, where Persian ships could maneuver freely, the confined space of the straits forced them into disarray. What had seemed like a Greek retreat was, in fact, a calculated move to control the battlefield. As the Persian ships advanced, they quickly found themselves packed tightly together, unable to maintain their formation. The massive fleet, designed for large-scale naval engagements, was now trapped in a bottleneck. Their oars clashed against one another, and confusion spread among the ranks as they struggled to maintain order. Themistocles, recognizing the moment to strike, gave the signal, and the Greek fleet surged forward. Athenian triremes, built for speed and maneuverability, cut through the Persian lines like a blade through soft metal. The Greek triremes were smaller, faster, and more agile, designed to ram enemy ships with their reinforced prows. One after another, Persian ships splintered upon impact, sending sailors and soldiers into the sea. The Greeks capitalized on their superior knowledge of the local waters, darting between enemy vessels and striking at their flanks. The tight conditions of the straits favored the Greeks' highly disciplined crews, while the larger Persian fleet found itself disorganized and vulnerable. Xerxes, watching from his throne, was at first confident, believing his navy would eventually crush the Greeks through sheer numbers. But as the battle raged on, his confidence began to wane. He saw his Phoenician admirals struggling to keep their ships aligned, Egyptian warships being overwhelmed, and his Ionian allies hesitating, perhaps questioning their loyalty to the Persian cause. The battlefield had turned into chaos, and the fleet he had once thought invincible was now crumbling before his eyes. One of the defining moments of the battle came when Queen Artemisia of Halicarnassus, a Persian ally, found herself trapped between Greek and Persian ships. In a desperate move, she rammed and sank a Persian vessel to convince the Greeks that she was on their side. The deception worked. Her ship was allowed to escape, while Xerxes, unaware that she had attacked his own forces, praised her courage. Ironically, she was one of the few Persian commanders to escape the disaster relatively unscathed. Meanwhile, the Persian ships were not only fighting the Greeks, but also each other. In their desperate attempts to maneuver, many crashed into their own allies, causing further chaos. With every passing hour, more and more Persian ships were either destroyed, captured, or forced to flee. The once mighty Persian fleet, which had seemed poised for absolute victory, was now broken and scattered. As the sun began to set over the waters of Salamis, the Greeks stood victorious. Hundreds of Persian ships had been sunk or abandoned, and what remained of the once mighty fleet was retreating in disarray. The Persian navy, which had once been seen as an unstoppable force, had suffered an unprecedented defeat. Themistocles had not only won the battle, he had turned the tide of the war. Xerxes, humiliated and furious, was faced with a critical decision. He still had an enormous land army, capable of continuing the war, but with his navy shattered, his supply lines were now at risk. Without naval dominance, it would be nearly impossible to sustain his forces deep in enemy territory. Fearing that the Greeks might soon take the offensive and cut off his retreat, Xerxes decided to withdraw the bulk of his army back to Asia, leaving behind a contingent under General Mardonius to continue the fight on land. The Battle of Salamis was more than just a Greek victory. It was a turning point in the war. Themistocles had outwitted one of the most powerful rulers of the ancient world, proving that strategy and knowledge of the terrain could triumph over sheer numbers. Xerxes, once confident of total conquest, was now forced into a defensive position. With the Persian fleet shattered at Salamis, Xerxes faced an urgent crisis. Though his land army remained immense and undefeated, the loss of naval supremacy meant that his vast military forces in Greece could no longer be supplied efficiently. Concerned about the safety of his empire and fearing a potential counterattack by the Greeks, Xerxes decided to withdraw from Greece, returning to Asia with a significant portion of his forces. However, he did not abandon the campaign entirely. He left behind his most trusted general, Mardonius, to lead the remaining Persian army and complete the conquest of Greece. Mardonius, a seasoned commander and a man of great ambition, knew that victory was still within reach. Though the Persians had suffered a naval defeat, their land forces were still vastly superior in numbers to the Greek army. He believed that if he could defeat the Greeks in open battle, Persian dominance would be restored. His strategy was to exploit divisions among the Greek city-states, offering terms of peace to Athens in hopes of breaking the fragile alliance. However, Athens, emboldened by its naval triumph, refused to negotiate, choosing instead to continue the fight. With diplomacy failing, Mardonius led his army back into central Greece, setting up camp in the rich and fertile lands near Plataea, a city loyal to the Greek alliance. Here, he established a strong defensive position, relying on cavalry skirmishes and scorched earth tactics to weaken the Greek resistance. He counted on the fact that the Greeks, who relied heavily on infantry, would struggle against the Persian cavalry in the open plains. However, his greatest mistake was underestimating the unity and determination of the Greek forces after Salamis. The Greeks, led by Sparta's regent Pausanias, assembled one of the largest hoplite armies in history. Troops arrived from Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and other allied city-states, forming a coalition force of approximately 40,000 hoplites and thousands of light infantry. The Spartan warriors, considered the finest heavy infantry of the ancient world, formed the backbone of the army. Despite their internal rivalries, the Greek city-states recognized that defeat at Plataea would mean the end of their independence. This understanding drove them to fight with extraordinary resolve. For days, the two armies faced each other across the Esopus River, neither side willing to fully commit to battle. Mardonius used his cavalry to harass the Greek supply lines, forcing the Greeks into a precarious position. However, the Persian army, despite its size, had a significant weakness. It relied heavily on lightly armored infantry, whereas the Greek hoplites were heavily armed with shields, spears, and bronze armor. If the battle turned into a direct clash of infantry, the Greeks would have the advantage. The turning point came when Mardonius ordered a full assault on the Greek positions, believing that the enemy was beginning to falter. The Persian cavalry launched aggressive attacks, disrupting Greek supplies and forcing them to reposition. However, in doing so, Mardonius had inadvertently weakened his own defensive line, exposing his troops to a Greek counterattack. Recognizing the opportunity, Pausanias ordered a full-scale Greek advance. The Spartans and Athenians, fighting side by side, charged across the battlefield, engaging the Persian infantry in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The battle quickly descended into chaos. The Persian archers, who had been effective at long range, found their arrows largely useless against the thick Greek shields. The lightly armored Persian infantry struggled to hold the line as the heavily armed Greek hoplites pushed forward relentlessly. In the heart of the battle, Mardonius himself fought fiercely, attempting to rally his troops. However, in the midst of the clash, he was struck down and killed, causing panic among his soldiers. Without their leader, the Persian formations collapsed. As the Persian ranks crumbled, many attempted to flee, only to be cut down by pursuing Greek warriors. The remaining Persian troops retreated to their fortified camp, but the Greeks, now fully in control of the battlefield, stormed the defenses and slaughtered the last remnants of the Persian force. What had started as a confident Persian offensive had ended in one of the most devastating defeats in their history. The victory at Plataea marked the end of the Persian invasion of Greece. With Mardonius dead and his army destroyed, any remaining Persian forces in the region either surrendered or fled back to Asia. The Greeks had proven that, through unity and superior military tactics, they could defeat the mightiest empire of their time. For the first time, Greece stood free from the Persian threat. The defeat of the Persian army at Plataea was not just a military victory. It was a defining moment in Western history. The war had tested the resilience of the Greek city-states and demonstrated the effectiveness of their hoplite warfare. As the smoke cleared from the battlefield of Plataea, the full weight of Xerxes' failed invasion began to settle over the Persian Empire. What had started as a campaign of domination and vengeance had turned into a costly and humiliating defeat. Xerxes, who had once watched with confidence from his golden throne as his navy advanced at Salamis, now faced a stark reality. His forces had been expelled from Greece, and the dream of conquest had crumbled before him. Though Persia remained the most powerful empire in the known world, its reputation had suffered a serious blow. The retreat from Greece was slow and arduous. After his humiliating withdrawal from Salamis, Xerxes had taken his personal guard and a portion of his army back across the Hellespont into Asia, leaving Mardonius to continue the campaign. Now, with Mardonius dead and his army destroyed at Plataea, the remaining Persian forces in Thrace, Macedon, and Ionia were left isolated. Many scattered, some surrendered, and others tried to return to Asia on their own. The once feared Persian military machine was in disarray, its momentum shattered. Xerxes' return to Susa, the grand capital of the Persian Empire, was far from a triumphant homecoming. Though he was still great king of Persia, ruler of one of the most magnificent civilizations of the ancient world, the scars of his failure ran deep. His ambitious plan to subjugate Greece had cost thousands of lives, vast resources, and the confidence of his subjects. The loss of his navy and the destruction of his best armies at Plataea and Mycale, where the Greeks had also won a decisive victory against the remaining Persian forces in Ionia, meant that the empire could no longer project power into the Aegean as it once had. Despite these setbacks, the Persian Empire remained vast and powerful. Xerxes still ruled over Egypt, Babylon, Lydia, and the rich lands of Persia, but his focus shifted away from military conquest. Having learned from his costly Greek campaign, he turned his attention to the internal affairs of his empire, seeking to strengthen what remained rather than expand further. His rule became defined less by warfare and more by construction projects, administration, and court intrigues. One of his greatest achievements during this period was the completion of grand architectural projects. His father, Darius I, had already begun construction on the opulent palaces of Persepolis, but under Xerxes, these projects expanded to a scale never before seen. He ordered the building of massive halls, intricate reliefs, and vast ceremonial spaces, turning Persepolis into a city worthy of the Persian kings. These structures symbolized his enduring power, even as his military prestige had suffered in Greece. However, within the royal court, Xerxes faced growing unrest. His failed campaign had not only weakened Persia's influence abroad, but had also emboldened factions within his own court. Rivalries among satraps, provincial governors, noble families, and military commanders began to intensify. While Persia had always been a vast and complex empire held together by bureaucracy and diplomacy, the cracks were beginning to show. Discontent simmered in the provinces, particularly in Babylon and Egypt, where rebellions had erupted in response to Persian rule. Despite these challenges, Xerxes sought to maintain stability. He reorganized provincial administrations, reasserted Persian dominance over rebellious territories, and continued his father's policies of multicultural tolerance, allowing different regions to maintain their customs and religions. Yet, even as he worked to consolidate his empire, he withdrew more and more from active rule, spending increasing amounts of time in the seclusion of his court, surrounded by eunuchs, concubines, and ambitious advisors. This withdrawal proved dangerous. Without strong oversight, the Persian court became a breeding ground for intrigue and betrayal. Many within the empire, including those in his inner circle, saw Xerxes as weakened by failure, his prestige tarnished by his losses in Greece. In the shadows of Persepolis and Susa, conspiracies against him began to take shape. In 465 BCE, after years of political turmoil, Xerxes met a violent end. He was assassinated in his own court, reportedly at the hands of his chief minister, Artabanus, who had conspired with members of the royal guard. The once mighty king, who had ruled over millions and commanded one of the greatest armies in history, was struck down in the heart of his own palace, a victim of the very power struggles he had sought to control. His death marked the beginning of a period of instability in Persia, as different factions vied for the throne. The death of Xerxes marked the end of an era in Persian history. His assassination in 465 BCE was not just the result of palace intrigue, but also a reflection of the internal instability that had taken root within the empire. Although Persia remained a vast and dominant force, the failed invasion of Greece had weakened the authority of the great king, and the once unquestioned supremacy of the Achaemenid rulers had begun to falter. Yet, despite his military failures and his tragic demise, Xerxes' reign left a profound and lasting legacy, one that extended far beyond the battlefield. One of the most enduring aspects of Xerxes' rule was his architectural vision. Under his orders, Persepolis was transformed into one of the greatest cities of antiquity. His grand constructions included the Gate of All Nations, a magnificent entrance to the city, symbolizing the unity of the diverse peoples under Persian rule. Intricately carved reliefs depicted delegations from across the empire bringing tributes, showcasing the vast reach of Persian influence. Even today, the ruins of Xerxes' palace and halls stand as a testament to his ambition and the artistic mastery of the Achaemenid civilization. Beyond architecture, Xerxes' reign also saw important developments in administration and governance. Although his focus had been on military expansion in the early years of his rule, the latter part of his reign was marked by efforts to stabilize the empire's vast territories. He continued his father's policies of religious and cultural tolerance, allowing conquered peoples to maintain their traditions and faiths. This policy was particularly evident in regions such as Babylon, Egypt, and Anatolia, where Persian administration worked alongside local customs to maintain stability. However, Xerxes also faced significant challenges in maintaining control over such a sprawling empire. The cost of his military campaigns had placed enormous strain on Persia's economy, and taxation was increased to sustain the empire's vast infrastructure and military needs. This led to growing dissatisfaction among subject peoples, particularly in Babylon, where multiple revolts had to be suppressed. While Persia remained a dominant force, it was clear that governing such a diverse empire required constant effort and vigilance. In the Greek world, Xerxes' name became synonymous with both arrogance and failure. Greek historians, particularly Herodotus, portrayed him as an ambitious but overly confident ruler whose excessive pride, hubris, led to his downfall. The burning of Athens, the defeat at Salamis, and the rout at Plataea were remembered not just as military events, but as moments that defined Greek resilience and Persian folly. Over time, the image of Xerxes in Western history became that of a tyrant whose reach had exceeded his grasp. However, to view Xerxes only through the lens of his Greek failures is to ignore the broader significance of his reign. While he may not have succeeded in conquering Greece, his empire remained the largest and most powerful in the world. His rule spanned from the Indus Valley in the east to the Aegean Sea in the west, incorporating countless cultures and peoples. Persia's dominance in the Near East remained unchallenged for over a century after his death, despite the setbacks in Greece. Furthermore, Xerxes' military campaigns had an unintended consequence. They united the Greek city-states like never before. The Persian invasions had forced bitter rivals such as Athens and Sparta to work together, planting the seeds for the eventual rise of Greek military power. This unity would later allow Alexander the Great to launch his own campaign against Persia, a campaign that would ultimately bring about the downfall of the Achaemenid Empire itself. In this sense, Xerxes' invasion set into motion events that would change the course of history, far beyond his own lifetime. The image of Xerxes also evolved beyond history books and political narratives. Over the centuries, he became a figure of myth and legend, appearing in various cultural works, including Persian, Greek, and even modern literature. His story has been told and retold, sometimes as a cautionary tale of overreach and ambition, and other times as a tragic figure, a ruler who sought greatness but fell short due to circumstances beyond his control. Even after his death, Persia remained a dominant force for over a century, but the weaknesses that emerged during Xerxes' reign foreshadowed the challenges that later Achaemenid rulers would face. The power struggles within the royal court, the difficulties of maintaining a vast empire, and the growing strength of external enemies all contributed to the eventual decline of Persian supremacy. Xerxes' assassination was not just a personal tragedy, but a warning sign of the instability to come. In the end, Xerxes was neither the greatest conqueror nor the weakest ruler of his dynasty. He was an ambitious monarch who sought to surpass his father's achievements, but was ultimately humbled by both his enemies and his own limitations. His failures in Greece did not erase the grandeur of his empire, but they marked a shift in history, one that would eventually lead to the rise of new powers and the decline of Persian dominance. Though he was slain by his own men, his name endures, carved into the ruins of Persepolis, written in the histories of Greece, and echoed through the ages as a ruler whose reach, for all its grandeur, could not quite grasp the world he sought to conquer.